Welcome back to Rise at Midweek. We're moving to an online edition here. Let me tell you, I am excited to jump back into teaching a little bit. It's something that I really enjoy, and Pastor Andy at Youth Group at home has done a great job. But this is just something I really enjoy, and hopefully this is something new that can stir up discussion. Maybe give you some things to talk about amongst yourselves, but hopefully on our Zoom meeting, and ultimately things that really apply to your life. As I've been sitting around kind of thinking on what we could be teaching about, I keep coming back to this idea of resetting just normal. I think we're all kind of in a weird new normal that I don't know we want to hold on to or what, but I know that it's going to be really hard to go back to what it was. And so I figured now would be a really good time as we're into this kind of reopening mindset as restaurants are starting to open back up. You are starting to see some things retail-wise open back up. Now we should kind of open ourselves back up to kind of evaluation, kind of reset our assumptions, reset our expectations, and then reset our outcomes in our spiritual life. And so I think what we're going to do is a three-part series here called Reset. And this is going to be the first session here where we're talking a little bit about resetting our assumptions. I want to take a minute, though, to kind of put you in the right mindset. I want to talk a little bit about some of the technological progress that we've made as people. If I just think about in my lifetime, or pretty close to in my lifetime, we have made just huge leaps in the technological advancement as a society. If you think about for a second, you are watching this on the internet in some way, shape, or form. I really want to know how old you guys think the internet is. It's ingrained in our society. It is the basis of most of your social contact at this point. Would you believe me that if I told you that the internet as we know it is really only 30 years old? In 1990, it was the World Wide Web was started and made available to the people here, the general public. And so now, like I said, we've got these smartphones that every day, everything, that's how we talk to most people. We've got text messages, social media. It's really amazing how the internet puts us in contact with people. We weren't content with having to write a letter or having to go to meet somebody somewhere in order to have this social contact. We found a digital way to do things better. In fact, we've even started to crowdsource huge problem solvings. Did y'all know that there is a puzzle website, and it's so much more than this. It's called Foldit, in which scientists are actually crowdsourcing protein folding. And you're all going to look at me and say, what in the world is protein folding? But it's this puzzle that you play, and they've got special parameters, special rules, and they'll allow you to do this puzzle, and the outcome is really you folding proteins and make them more stable so that they can go and they can fight diseases and viruses in the body. And that's a huge thing to be thinking about right now given our environment. And to you and me, I don't know a thing about creating stable proteins, but I can play a puzzle game. And so the fact that we have the opportunity as people to set up a game online, let anybody in the world play this game and have medical breakthroughs in order to help treat and fight viruses that otherwise would go unchecked is incredible. Like if you were to tell that to somebody in 1990, hey, this internet that we just saw is going to be able to fight viruses 18 years later because Foldit is now 12 years old, I come to learn. But the whole point to this is humans love to innovate. We are not happy with just things as it is. I mean, I think in general, we weren't happy in the Stone Age. We weren't happy when we didn't have the wheel. As we move forward, we weren't happy with people dying at 40. We weren't happy with no internet, no electricity. We weren't happy with horses pulling buggies. So we moved forward. We moved up. And I think it's really clear if you look back at history, we are a driven society. We are a driven people. Humans are just driven. And the thought crossed my mind, why are we not as driven in our spiritual lives? And I think when we have a cause to get behind, we find that it's easy to on that wave of emotion, go in, do something about it, and just really knock some things out, innovate, find creative ways to solve problems. But I feel like a lot of times that same enthusiasm does not translate to our spiritual life. And so what I think that is I think that's a problem with our assumptions and how our spiritual life is supposed to go. So I would like to kind of help us reset with a reading through the book of Nehemiah. And so just a little background on the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah and Ezra, two books in the Old Testament, they kind of go through in detail the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And so Jerusalem, if you recall in 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, is kind of the seat of power for the Israeli nation. King David, King Solomon, these guys have made massive improvements. This was a booming, awesome city until sin got in the way. Kings started not to follow God's way. They thought they knew better. And so God said, hey, y'all have to straighten up or things are not going to go well. And so the Babylonians come in and they force the country of Israel into exile. And man, they burn Jerusalem. And so for 70 years, Jerusalem has been sitting around burned, most of the people in exile. And so here's where we pick up in Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah is actually a servant for the king of Babylon. And he actually comes across a guy who's been traveling around. They say he comes from Judah. And so he's essentially asking this guy that's coming back, hey, how are things at home? And he tells him, things are not great. The walls are still broken down, the gates are burned, the houses are burned. Anybody who's living in the area is suffering real bad just because there is really nothing there to protect them. And so when he hears this, I think it's really cool what Nehemiah does. He can only think of one thing to do. And let me read to you from Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 4 through 11. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. That is so important. And in a time where he's hurting, where he sees need, he continues to fast and to pray before God. Verse 5, and I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant. And now I pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel. We have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you've commanded from your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them through your outcasts, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him the mercy in sight of this man. So he ends the chapter saying, now I was a cupbearer to the king, and he's speaking back to asking for God to give him favor in the eyes of the king. And so this prayer is actually really important for a number of reasons, but Nehemiah very clearly has his priorities in order here. He knew that he could run to God. The first thing he thought to do was to just fast and pray. Nehemiah realized that his role in this started with a prayer from a servant's heart, and that it ended with an answer from an awesome and powerful God. In verses 7 through 10 here in chapter 1, Nehemiah tells God exactly what he's seen in his family's history, the family of the people of Israel. And it's that whenever you're obedient, God fulfills his promise and you see blessing. But whenever you're disobedient, there's punishment. There's things that happen, and the Israelites are now in exile, and they've been in exile for several decades. And so I'll just be honest with you, in my life, I found, and I think it lines up very clearly with the Bible, that when we act against what God has for us, that's whenever we assume that we know best, that's whenever we run into trouble. Let me ask you that, what if for just a bit we assume that God's plan is the right one? And even though we have questions, we go along. What if we approached our relationship with Him as more of a servant instead of like, hey God, this is what's on my Amazon wish list? I think that we need to reset the assumptions we've made about the roles in our relationship with God. I think we need to approach this more with a servant's heart, seeking what God has instead of what we want. Now, we the cool part about this is we have free will, and I think that's also the frustrating part of this. If you can imagine a scene or like a play or a movie in which you have this director who's thought everything out, he sees the end, and if everything just goes according to his plan, it is a perfect award-winning movie or play. But you allow the actors to play whatever role they want. So you have, I don't know, 20 leading men, no support people, nobody sticking to the script. Not going to be a very good movie, right? Regardless of how the director or the producer or whoever has set these things up. And so with that image in mind, I think it becomes really easy to see how our world has gotten so messed up. We are all choosing our role, and sometimes it aligns with what the awesome, powerful, all-knowing director has given for us, but a lot of times it doesn't. And so here's the part that gets frustrating is that we have free will, but we also have the consequences that come with that free will. And just like in verses 7 through 10, whenever you're obedient, those consequences are actually really good. But whenever we are disobedient, we fight that plan, I think you'll find a lot more often than not, bad things start to happen. There's punishment for disobedience. So let me ask you this. Have you ever found yourself where you feel very strongly about something? You're in a position and just something is really eating up at you, but you feel like you can't do anything about it. Or maybe you feel like you might have a way forward, but it's either too hard, or you feel like you're too young, or you feel like that you don't have the funds or the capability to do something. All you can do is kind of spread the word. You don't feel like that's enough, and so you end up doing nothing, right? I wonder if Nehemiah kind of thought about his position in this way. I wonder if he had that mental battle in his mind. But I also think that it's really cool the power that he has. I mean, he's not the king, but he's not a servant like a poor villager or anything like that. He has a good job. He's a cupbearer in the house of the king, and so he actually has direct access to one of the most powerful people in the world, right? So let's read about what he does whenever he actually gets to talk to the king about this, and we'll see what he did in that situation where, I'm not too powerful, but maybe there's something I can do here. Nehemiah chapter 2, 2 through 8. And the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." I think it's really funny that Nehemiah walks into the king and the king automatically knows, like, something different about you. Something's wrong. What's wrong with your face? Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Then the king said to me, "What are you requesting? What are you asking of me?" So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, then you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, with the queen sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him time. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates, fortress, temple, and the walls of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked for the good hand of my God was upon me. I think it's really cool to see how God placed Nehemiah in the perfect place to have the maximum impact. He gave Nehemiah the desire and the heart and the opportunity, all with the right access to the right people to push those people towards action. Now, God has the ultimate authority here. And it's Him that placed Nehemiah in that right position with just the right amount of power, just the right amount of authority, so that he had the choice. He could lean into what God had for him, or he could let the problem continue. He could not lift a finger and allow his kinsmen, his Israelite brotherhood or brothers, to stay in exile. Now, I think we're faced with a choice like that often. With so much hurt around us, it's easy to forget that we can help. We are called to be more than what we might be individually. Now, I firmly believe that God puts us in a place to do incredible things. I don't think anything is necessarily written in stone as to what we're going to do for our entire lives, but we have seasons in our life where we're placed in the perfect place to do something incredible. Now, that is probably kind of scary, because you're probably thinking, I don't know what that is. I'm too young. I don't have anything that I can do to help. Yeah, there's so much. Where do I start? It might be a difficult thing. It might be something that actually costs you something. It could cost you friendships. It could cost you relationships with your family. Or probably even the scariest one of all would be, it may cost you life as you know it, because if you step into God's will, it's going to be really hard to step out. Or to step back into what normal used to be, right? We need to respect God's role in our life. And I say that because we need to be ready to act on what God has done. We need to be ready to act on the situations that He put us in. Now, whatever season you're in your life, God has a plan. And you really, really need to just learn to, we all need to learn to lean in and understand that God has put us here and we have something to contribute. Now, I'll level with you. God's plan would probably feel a lot easier if it perfectly aligned with our desires. But here's another little bit of truth. Your desires probably align with God's more than you let on, more than we probably even understand. Because most of us want to do good things. Most of us don't look around, looking for people to hurt or things like that. What we don't like is not being in control. And so it's hard for us to say, hey, God, I want you to be in control of my life instead of me. Now, here's where we can learn from Nehemiah. Because Nehemiah trusted God to provide. And if you go back through that list, specifically there in 7, he starts asking the king to have different governors and different people provide things to him. And while it seems like people are providing here, Nehemiah remembers and understands and absolutely submits to God. And because he has submitted to God, it's God that is providing these things. And that includes favor with the king to make all of this happen. Now, Nehemiah could have kept his mouth shut. At that decision point, he could have chickened out. He could have said, yeah, that hurts, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And he could have gotten nothing in return. It probably would have been hurtful to his people. But instead, he spoke up. He said something. He took a risk. He went with God's plan, and he got put in charge of literally an opportunity of a lifetime. So here's what I want to know. Here's what I want to ask you. What are you passing up? What are you keeping quiet about? What has God put in front of you in this season of your life to be able to make a difference in? If you're not sure, that's okay. I can honestly tell you, I not only didn't know, I didn't care when I was your age. And now you don't have that excuse, because here's the challenge. If you don't know, you need to ask God to open your eyes. You need to say, hey, God, I want to know what you've put me in this season for. He loves you enough to die for you. He loves you enough to give you a purpose. Let Him speak into that purpose. Let Him tell you what this season in your life is for. Now, if you know what that is, then hey, that's great. Are you doing everything you can? Are you doing what you need to do to push that forward? Are you running from it? Are you ignoring it? Maybe you just, I cannot get past this feeling like I just can't do anything about it. Well, I mean, let me go back to Nehemiah. He probably thought that same thing. So he gets to go to Jerusalem, and he begins to kind of survey the damage. Nehemiah 2, 11 through 13 here. So I went to Jerusalem, and I was there for 3 days. Then I arose in the night, and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley gate to the dragon spring to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, and its gates had been destroyed by fire. Nehemiah is looking at a broken city that is desolate. Not even like wild dogs are running around. All he's saying is, I have my horse, and that's the only thing that's around here. There's nothing for anybody. He's looking at walls that are broken and seemingly unrepairable. Could it be? Could it be that we are broken in the same way? That what looks like something that's unrepairable is in fact fixable if we submit to what God has for us. We are broken and flawed. We are all actors in a play that should make sense, but we're playing our own role. Without submission to the director, without understanding God's role in all this, we are hopeless. We cannot fix all that we've messed up. But Nehemiah may have been looking at this broken city, but he saw God's plan to rebuild it. It was a perfect plan, and God sees that same brokenness in us, and here's where that free will comes back in. He's waiting for us to choose to let Him rebuild us, because He can fix us, without our submission, but that's not free will. He wants us to seek Him. He wants us to allow Him to work in our lives. And so that's where I really want to point back to Nehemiah one more time. At the end of chapter 2 is really awesome, because it's really this triumphant thing where he's rallying everybody together to really get this done. Nehemiah 2:17-20. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer in derision. Can I just say, I think we can all look in our lives and say, oh my gosh, look at the trouble I am in. Look at how broken I am. Look at how far away from God I feel. But with God, anything is possible. He can fix you. He can rebuild. It's incredible. And just continue here with what Nehemiah is saying. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also for the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let's rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. But when Sanballat and Tobiah, servant of Geshem the Arab, heard of it, they jeered us and despised us and said, what are you even doing? Are you rebelling against the king? Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we are His servants. We will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. Can you imagine just being so sure of God's plan in your life that as people come along and as obstacles come along and as you look at just a broken city and any and everything that could be going wrong is going wrong, and saying to anybody who comes at you, God is going to fix this. I know that He has good plans for me and that it is going to be good because I am on His team. That's incredible. Even when people were coming to shame Nehemiah, he turned to them and he said, this is God's perfect plan. You stay out of it. You that want to keep us down, you that want to distract us from this work, you are not going to have any say whenever this gets done. He knew what God's plan was, and he was going to settle for nothing less. He wasn't going to let people distract him. He wasn't going to let obstacles distract him. He was going to get it done God's way. He knew, as we should, that he couldn't do it on his own. He knew at this point he had proven to himself that God made a way. God can make a way in your life. The same way that he looked at those broken walls, God is looking at us and he's saying, I can fix you. You just need to get out of the way. You need to give up control. And so this is so true in our lives. We need to seek more of God and less of us. We need to change these assumptions about our roles, that I need to be in control. I need to do this. When in reality, we have to approach this with a servant's heart and say, God, I need you. So in between, we're getting ready to close here. I want you to just take a minute and sit and reflect on what the assumptions are in your spiritual life right now. What assumptions have you made about your role in your relationship with God? What are some assumptions that you've made about God in this role? Is he kind of your Amazon shopping list where you're just waiting for somebody to send you something? Or are you willing to submit and maybe go his way for something even better? Are you really learning and seeking what God has for you? Are you trying to understand what is going on in your life? Seeing what he's put you, where he's put you, and what he's brought you through? Are you really seeking his plan in that? I know that you and I and all believers have been put in a place to make a huge impact for the kingdom. And I just want to know, what assumptions have you made that are holding you back from making that impact? Let me pray for us real quick, and then in a few minutes, if you're watching this live, we will jump to a Zoom call. But if you're watching this, sometime down the road, I'm going to link all of our website, our social media pages. You'll be able to get in contact with us through anything like that. We would love to hear from you. We would love to talk to you. If you are watching this live, make sure that you join our Remind. The link will be down here in the description. That's how you can keep up with all of our latest things. That's how you'll get the information for the Zoom meeting and anything else that's coming up for our ministry. And so we would just love to be in contact with you and hear about what's going on in your life and just be a small part of that. So let me go ahead and pray to close us out, and then I hope to be able to talk to you guys very soon. Dear Lord, we just come to you this evening praising you and thanking you for who you are, God. God, you are awesome and powerful. You are a God that is the only place we should run in times of trouble, in times of obstacle, but also in times of joy and celebration, God. Lord, I just ask that you soften the hearts, God. Let us take kind of a really honest and authentic look at what we've assumed about our role and about your role. And Lord, let us move forward with an honest discussion about how we could be better, or maybe celebrate what we're doing really, really good, God. I know that the students that I work with are talented and incredibly intelligent. Man, God, and I love them because they're unique, and sometimes they're just goofy. But I know that you have a huge and awesome plan for each and every one of us, God. Lord, help us seek that. Give us the encouragement. Give us just the heart to seek what it is you have for us in this season. Lord, we love you and we praise you. We ask these things in your name. Amen. I love you guys. Again, hope to talk to you soon.